I think I'm going to get us rolling because Dinah's got a great, powerful message, and we want to make sure to get it all in um, before you've got more sessions to get to. So, good morning. Thank you all for being here today. It's my honor today to introduce you to Dinah Becton Consuegra. Closing the opportunity gap has been the primary driver in Dinah's 20 years in education. She's served in various leadership capacities for districts, schools, and nonprofits, including her roles as the Director of Partnership Development at PBL Works and the West Regional Director for EL Education, former Expeditionary Learning. Dinah focuses on examining the systems that lead to educational inequities by uncovering data and convening focus groups to gain an understanding of equity and access across the instructional program. She began her career as an English, film, and humanities teacher in the Los Angeles Unified School District. She deeply believes in the capacity of all students to learn and has created innovative programs for youth aimed at closing the opportunity gap using PBL, social justice, and interdisciplinary studies. Works is delighted to bring Dinah virtually to Wisconsin today to engage with this group of forward-thinking educators as we explore the connections between engaged learning and equity. Thank you, Dinah. We're so excited.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with you all, and I really am appreciating the naming conventions here. They're helping me get familiar with where you all are from. So how many of you could have ever imagined that we would have been doing 3 months plus of emergency remote learning this year? And how many of you likely have your own children at home, right? While you're accomplishing such a Herculean feat. So thank you for the facial expressions, by the way. I really appreciate that, because that's exactly how I feel about having 2 young kids at home. I could have never imagined that we would be in this place, but we're here. So I just wanted to take a moment to just cheers to you. You did it. Be proud of yourself. Pat yourself in the back. So in these times, you know, of the pandemic, medical professionals are getting praised for being on the front lines of the pandemic. And that's great. I get it. You know, they're saving lives, they're risking their own, they're overworked, and many at the beginning and probably now are lacking PPE to keep them safe. But I think what's sorely missing in this conversation and current reality is the need to lift up teachers who are also heroes. And I know for me and for many students, teachers are more important than doctors. In fact, Dr. Etta Collins, a professor at University of Southern California, has said that teachers are more important than doctors because the deaths they create are, I had to undo myself out of the share screen. They create cannot be seen. When they kill a learner, it often goes unseen and is just as significant because of its lifelong impacts. Now, this is akin to what Bettina Love has described in this way. And that's what you'll see pop up on your screen at this time. The type of violence toward children of color is less visceral and seemingly less tragic than physical acts of murder. But spirit murdering is a slow death, a death of the spirit, a death that is built on racism and intended to reduce, humiliate, and destroy people of color. Black and brown folks are facing facts that many with privilege have had the option to ignore most of their lives. For centuries in this country, taking in racism has been as easy as breathing, unfortunately. For those who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color, despite our best intentions to put on that mask, we cannot filter racism's harmful and often deadly effects. We must all be able to take off the masks that try to protect or deny the existence of racism. And instead, we must choose to begin to breathe in the air of anti-racism deeply and slowly. This is the global shift we are in now. Breathing involves the process of letting air into your lungs. It is an action just like the work of being an anti-racist educator is. I know it feels like so long ago, but many of you have likely been on an airplane with little ones. And you might remember what flight attendants tell us during takeoff. In the event of loss of cabin pressure, if you have a child traveling with you, make sure to put on your mask first before assisting with theirs. This is exactly how the work of anti-racism is done. Like breathing, it is an internal action. And before we look outwards, we must first look inside of ourselves. We must examine our own biases. We have become experts at PPE, though let's be honest, before this all happened, I had no idea what PPE stood for. But today, I'd like to reconceptualize the term PPE and talk about the PPE we need as educators that will allow us and our students to thrive in this moment and beyond. And that PPE is three things. The first P is proximity, the second is project-based learning, and the third is equity. Teachers, we see all of your efforts right now. As a former teacher myself, who typically woke up at 6 a.m. to be at school at 7 to start the day at 7:20, by the way, how fair is this to teachers' natural biorhythms? I worked for a high school that was a public high school, had 3,300 students, 3 tracks, went year round. I taught 6 periods of 58 minutes with 7-minute breaks in between. So if you ever want to understand the power of a second or a minute, just ask an educator. And after one day, I went through about 160 students. And over time, the number of students multiplied exponentially. So this amounts to a lot of instructional time and a lot of minutes. That's power. And yet many of us, when given the option to do stuff outside of that time, will still be here at professional development. So I just want to thank you again for being here with us this morning, given all the other things you can likely be doing. In this virtual world we are living in, it's important that we do a land acknowledgement. So in this spirit, I want to tell you that I'm joining you from my home office in Oakland, California, the birthplace of the Black Panther movement. I'm also love and want to give thanks to the Ohlone people whose land I get to call home. And now I want to just turn it over to you all, and I'd love for you to tell me where home is for you right now and just what your current role is. So I'll just give you about a minute or so to put that in the chat box. Nice. Great, so all over, mainly Wisconsin. I think we had someone from Canada yesterday. Looks like Minnesota. Great, and all kinds of roles from CFO to kindergarten teachers. Great, special ed, welcome. Nice. Well, what if I told you there's one thing you can do in your classroom that will be a complete game changer for students? One thing that brings love and authenticity. One thing that gets students excited about nearly anything. The first P in PPE is borrowed directly from Brian Stevenson's brilliant TED Talk. And if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. And that P is proximity. As a former teacher, I believe in modeling the behavior we expect to see in classrooms. So as such, we're about to get proximate with each other. So we're going to get into breakout rooms with a few other people. And once you're in, and I recommend you take a picture of this because many of times you go into the breakouts and then you forget what you were asked to do. So once you're in there, choose one person to keep time. That's going to be the hardest job because you're going to hold people to exactly 1 minute of sharing your life story. So I'm going to give a few seconds to just make sure nobody has questions on this, and then we'll bring you right back at exactly 5 minutes from now. Okay, all right, Sarah, if you can launch us into breakouts, thank you.
And if you haven't done breakouts before, you should get a pop-up on your screen that you can click to join the breakout, and then similar, that's how you'll get back to this room.
Sure, I'm admitting someone right now, so they might need to be sent. It's the Eagle River one.
Yes, I'm looking for a room that's only got a couple of
Eagle's
people.
Wing. Sorry. Who is that? Gabby? Gabrielle?
Okay. I will send you to...
Sarah, I think you set me to 10, so you maybe 10 could be a good option.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Good.
Okay.
And then I already, I hit close because it gives them 2 minutes to come back. So
Okay,
sort of
perfect.
2 minutes in, and then I'll give them 2 minutes back.
And it looks like Aki needs another breakout. She was the only one there.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I forgot that we had the whole Green Schools crew in yesterday too.
Yes, that was great. I can't
Dinah, are you a baseball fan?
assign.
Am I a what?
A baseball fan?
Not so much, honestly.
No?
I'm a basketball person.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, you're doing fine then the past few years.
Sort of, but
Yeah.
yeah, except for the fact that our team fell apart
Yeah.
and moved to San Francisco. But at any rate, yeah.
Yeah. That's they got a brand new facility and lost all the talent.
Terrible.
All right. They should close in about 30 seconds and then we'll have everybody back.
Okay, perfect.
All right. I think we're just about all back now, Dinah. Thanks.
All right, great. And I see some familiar faces from yesterday. Hi, Shane. Welcome back, everyone. How's it like to get proximal with what was likely a group of complete strangers? Type it in this chat box. Let me know how that went for you all. Be honest. Yep, fast. Yeah, vulnerable for sure. Nice to quickly meet people. Great. So many of the activity and feelings that you have, right, really capture how students feel when they first walk into classrooms, right? Like excited, but also vulnerable, great, but then quickly feeling like things are so rushed, right? And that awkwardness, right? When they're first asked something that they're just like, oh my God, what are they asking, right? What is this for? It raises anxiety, creates fear that somehow what they do in that moment will be weaponized against them by either the teacher through a grade perhaps, or by a fellow student by maybe getting bullied for something they might have said. But in this activity, you were all in control of your narrative. But think about this. For how many students who enter our classrooms and buildings are their life stories already told by others? How many of us adults are guilty of creating singular stories based on limited information that we gather in classrooms? Right? Based on the country of origin, based on their race, based on their perceived socioeconomic status, or maybe how a sibling acted a few years ago. So in order to make students fully human, we must get vulnerable and get proximate with them. And we do this by listening to their life stories. So for me, my journey towards justice began the day I took my very first breath. I am a daughter of the Midwest, born and raised in Chicago. I'm the oldest and only daughter of immigrant parents. Their sacrifices landed me at the first dual language school in the Midwest, the Inter-American Magnet School, the top-ranked high school in the country, which is a PBL school, by the way, Illinois Mathematics and Science Academy, multiple elite colleges, and now a career in education. My success is based on an intense longing to carve out a different reality than most people that look like me. My success is driven by the ways in which the system fails Black and brown youth. My younger brothers have had very different stories to mine. This is them when they were little. My middle brother was part of the school to prison pipeline, spending a significant amount of time in prison. And my youngest brother on the left went through 5 different high schools trying to graduate and then ultimately dropped out and got his GED years later. Both brothers are still struggling to navigate life in a world that consistently places obstacles in their way for having criminal records or not going to college. I shared this personal story with you all this morning to get proximate despite the miles between us. I spent a lot of time talking to my brothers, trying to understand why our trajectories look so different, besides the fact that they're both boys, which we know makes a difference. And I can summarize my findings in 2 themes. 1, they never had an adult get proximate with them throughout their whole school journey. And 2, neither of them felt deep joy in school. And students feel joy when you tap into their personal stories, when you involve those they love on, like their families and their communities, into the learning process. That is the proximal part. The part that deeply connects to them, builds authentic relationships, the part that can serve as their champions. We are in a pivotal moment in this country. I would say world, but that ship has sailed, and we here in the United States are the Titanic. As you likely all know, lack of leadership is killing us. And I want to pause here to reconceptualize the term leadership. I mean leadership not by management of others or fancy title. I mean leadership as in to be of service to others. I mean it is a quality all of us have innately, but sometimes imposter syndrome or self-doubt take over, and we like to deflect it on others and complain as if we have no accountability. You all know what I'm talking about, and if you don't, just go to any teacher's lounge, when we can, of course, and just listen to the conversation. I like to center leadership in all of us because we must each act as leaders. Be proximal to leadership. And as leaders, we have a critical choice to make. So I'm going to show you a clip shortly of one of my favorite movies. I used to actually teach this to my high school students, The Matrix. And in The Matrix, Morpheus, played by Lawrence Fishburne, gives Neo, played by Keanu Reeves, a choice. I'm going to let that clip play.
Do you want to know what it is? The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. What truth? That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind. Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. I'm offering is the truth, nothing more. Follow me.
All right, thank you, Sarah. So we are in a matrix moment. Similarly to the choice Neo had, we can either live in an alternate reality, or we can dig in and see the world for what it really is. We can take the blue pill and wait for this pandemic to be over, simply get back to life as normal before this all happened. Or we can take the red pill and pull the rug up from under us and really completely reconceptualize how schooling and education should look like. Writer and poet Zora Neale Hurston once said, "There are years that ask questions and there's years that answer." And 2020 has really been a year that asks questions. But what I'm most concerned about, and you should be too, is how are we responding? So let's hope you all chose the red pill. And if you didn't, you might want to put me on mute for the next few minutes because you may not want to hear what I'm going to say. So allow me to play Morpheus and take you down the rabbit hole of education. It's no secret that schools are designed to produce the exact same results that they intended to produce since their inception. And in Wisconsin, you all hold a title that you should not be proud of, which is that you're the state with the biggest racial opportunity gap in the entire country. So before the pandemic, students were already disengaged from learning, and now they're even further marginalized in our emergency remote learning context. So many of you may already know about one pedagogy that has the power to help students liberate themselves and become agents of their own learning. The second P in our necessary PPE is project-based learning. This P will relieve a tremendous amount of stress teachers feel in teaching because it makes teaching more sustainable than the typical cycle, right, of waking up, going to work, coming home, lesson planning, grading, going back to bed, and doing it all over again. It completely shifts the role of a teacher as a facilitator and puts students directly in charge of their own learning. Project-based learning allows students to feel like they're solving real complex problems going on in the real world. And getting access to PBL gives them that protection, just like PPE, from boring lectures and rote textbook instruction. So if you're likely wondering, well, that's great, but how are we going to do that in this context now? First, we need to allow students to have voice and choice in their own learning. This one is one of the central tenets of project-based learning. We need to ask students to dream and envision a future full of radical hope and revolutionary love. And let me be a bit controversial by saying that the Band-Aid we've put on emergency remote learning by responding with more technology is only amplifying the wound for our most vulnerable students. So how about we stop spending more time with technology and instead find ways for students to connect to themselves, each other, our natural world, to play, and dare I say, to go low tech. And I don't mean low tech as in worksheets. We know students are already tech literate, but many are not spending enough time outdoors or deeply connecting with others. And that's the getting proximate part again. Our rabbit hole is deep and long. Many of us are trying to adapt to emergency remote learning, but increasingly doing things that none of us were trained for and none of us have ever done before. Our students are being asked to sit in Zoom meetings all day, every day. And by the way, this isn't a newsflash, but this does not meet either the teacher or the student's developmental needs. Many of us are also full-time parents juggling between this and being full-time educators. And as a mom, I can guess how parents and teachers feel in this moment of uncertainty across the country. And I'm gonna show this viral meme to demonstrate those feelings. Right, many of you may have seen that. So many of us are also protesting state-sanctioned violence against Black people. We're choosing to act in ways that we haven't for decades. There's something tangible and joyful about thinking about a new anti-racist world, and it is so inspiring and beautiful to see. And though all of these layers of struggle embody our current reality, we also need to make space for a completely different educational system. We cannot return to what we used to do. It was failing our students. Even before this pandemic, we were struggling to meet the needs of our students. To illustrate this, I want to bring in the story of one of my favorite Chicagoan rappers, Chance the Rapper. That's his album cover. Many people don't know this about him, but this album that you're seeing in your screen, 10, was recorded following a 10-day suspension for possessing marijuana on his high school campus. Now, how's that for taking a chance? If only all students were able to channel brilliance when the system does them wrong, we would live in a different world. And this is a perfect example of how some students, those on the margins, have already been forced into emergency remote learning, and yet they rise up and cultivate their genius. But we can do more to engineer opportunities like this for our youth. Now more than ever, we need project-based learning to reach students who are struggling to make sense of their world and looking for opportunities to take action. We cannot afford to continue to disengage students by asking them to be passive learners. They must take to our streets, they must take to our communities. We must meet this moment, and PBL meets this moment. PBL is this movement. PBL, when done well, is liberation pedagogy. I urge each of you this morning to join this movement, a movement that can love on our students, make them feel a sense of joy, engagement, like they belong. PBL creates agency. It makes space for every single student to find their joy and to engage as leaders of their own learning and belong to a community of others lifted by that same vision. I like to see PBL as much more than a pedagogy. In doing PBL, more students are going to have this transformative experience and be engaged with their world and their futures. And I'd hope that we want that for all of our children. It has so much potential, and ensuring this happens together is how we will succeed. It is our calling, our challenge, and our urgency. We know that there's a connection between school discipline and the prison pipeline. Black students are 3 times more likely to be suspended or expelled than white students, and subsequently 3 times more likely to be in contact with the juvenile justice system. I know this pipeline well, as I've seen it play out with my younger brothers, and I carry this burden on my shoulders every day, and am constantly reminded of this when I look into the eyes of my 2 sons, pictured here. And I wonder, will their demographics impact their destiny? The data is bleak, isn't it? However, for every number, there's a person, and for every person, there's others dispelling the numbers, proving that demographics do not determine our destiny. There is another world, a world with schools like One City in your backyard. Their rockstar CEO, Kaleem Care, has been trying to make a school in Madison for over 10 years. And after jumping all kinds of hoops, finally 2 years ago, they were able to open up. The school was specifically designed to help Black boys in Madison. And in a short time, they've already closed the opportunity gaps for so many of their students, and they're showing how dedication to quality education, a community mindset, and focus on the community is providing opportunities for students. They're working alongside families. They also have an amazing preschool attached to their school and provide longer school days, year-round school, food programs, and many other opportunities. Every day when I wake up, I choose to stand up for boys and girls that look like me. I choose to be a force for change. Now ask yourselves, what do you stand for? We must all wrestle with our fears, roll up our sleeves, and do what our children need. This is a pipeline, and it results in fatal consequences, yet we have to face it and do the work. Our last tool in our PPE is equity, and I would argue within equity that we need to center racial equity. As a mother of 2 boys who are 2 and 4, I often think about what memories I'd like them to hold about me after I die. What words will others remember me by? And I want you to take a few seconds to think about what words you want people to remember you by. This is our collective defining moment, and I want to ask all of you, what will your legacy be? Last week, I listened to one of my favorite podcasts called On Being with Krista Tippett, and she was interviewing this woman named Jacqueline Novogratz, who was one of the first to start the field we now know as impact investing. And in her interview, I was so struck because a few times she said this, and she said, I want future generations to look back on us and say, look at how hard we tried, not look at how blind we were. The relevance of this struck me because I wondered if we're all collectively trying hard enough, or if we're not seeing the tremendous opportunity that lies before us right now. And I remember my first defining moments in shelter in place. It was navigating our 2-year-old Ayo's birthday. Now, typically, with our 4-year-old, I was like, he's only 2, who cares? Let's just do whatever, he's not gonna remember. We're gonna have many birthdays ahead of us in the future. But I thought about that word I mentioned earlier, legacy. I wanna play a clip from a movie called Inside Out, which by the way is a wonderful children's movie about feelings. And this clip in particular is about a concept called core memories.
Anyway, these are Riley's memories, and they're mostly happy, you'll notice, not to brag. But the really important ones are over here. I don't want to get too technical, but these are called core memories. Each one came from a super important time in Riley's life, like when she first scored a goal. That was so amazing.
Look at that. Very nice.
And each core memory powers a different aspect of Riley's personality. Like Hockey Island. Goofball Island is my personal favorite.
Come back here, you little monkey. Oh, you're
Yep, Goofball is the best.
Now back to the story about Ayo. So though he wouldn't remember this was his core memory, turning 2 during a global pandemic. I imagine being able to share a vivid memory, so we did a drive-by birthday celebration. Friends made banners, they picked his favorite music to blast, there were bubbles in the air, and that day shaped a beautiful core memory. And memories like this change our framework. By the way, I told Ayo that I'd be sharing this story with you today, and he wanted to make sure I shared the following slide with you all. So I ask you, what core memory do you want your students to remember when this pandemic is over? And someone asked them what learning was like during this time. You're gonna see a link on your chat box for Padlet. Once you see that link, I want you to click into it. You're gonna see a plus sign to add, and I want you to complete the following sentence. My teacher did blank during COVID-19. So I'll give us a few minutes to complete that Padlet. Nice. I believe you can post twice, so if you all were just testing and didn't realize that it would post, I think you can do another post. Engaged, cared, made me laugh, did not become militant, i.e. Khan Academy, okay? Everything she could to make an impact. Wow, a 180 for me. all he could, maintained a relationship, allowed me to be me, made me laugh. I see the common trend was that most of you didn't say, made me, panic and feel despair about COVID, right? Most of you have really not sleep. That's definitely a good thing. So you have positive, uplifting pieces, right? And for those of you that might have had a hard time or actually thought, whoa, Jews, I don't have anything too positive to say, I want you to think about what shifts you need to make this happen. Think about our PPE. How will you get proximate? How will you provide student opportunities to get proximate with each other and their communities? How will you begin to incorporate project-based learning? What projects will bring students joy? How can your legacy as a teacher center equity-driven practices? Now, I know Wisconsin pretty well, and I saw where you all were from, and I know many of you have pretty homogeneous communities, and I would actually say that that is the work. Working with white students, working with white staff on anti-racism, that is also the work. So I want you to imagine right now one student who can use an extra dose of engagement. And as you imagine them, I want you to get close to them. And close your eyes with me as I'm going to share something from Jacqueline Novogratz's book. And I love her work because she writes so beautifully about this concept of having moral leadership, which strikes me as so relevant for the time we're living in right now. And she writes, whatever you aim to do, whatever problem you hope to address, remember to accompany those who are struggling, those who are left out, who lack the capacities to solve their own problems. We are each other's destiny. In closing, I want to share a beautiful story with you all from the 1992 Barcelona Olympics about sprinter Derek Redmond. And I'll let this video tell his incredible story.
When troubles come and my heart burdened be, then I am still and wait here in the silence until you come and sit a while with me. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be. raise me up to more than I can be.
Be that person. Help a student who may have had an unexpected momentary defeat to cross that finish line. Get next to them in their pain and encourage them to keep moving towards the finish line. You can't measure courage, but you can feel the love from teachers who wear their PPE proudly. Our students deserve this, and we are here to break through our own barriers and instill in them radical hope to help create a more joyous future for our country and build a better world for us all. Isn't this why you got into the profession? I know I did. So let's create that legacy together so that all students can be heard, seen, and feel like they belong in our Wisconsin schools. Thank you.
Yay, thank you. Feel free to unmute and cheer. Thank you so, so much.
Yeah, this is the part that is
It's
awkward.
so quiet.
Right?
So I'm gonna clap.
Thank you all. So.